Okay, it's past 7, so I think we will get started. All right. Okay. Let's open prayer. Father, this evening we just thank you that we can gather together again to look into your word. We just pray that you might instruct us and encourage us, and that you would show us what we can apply to our lives so that we might glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, 2 weeks ago, we left off, we had done 2 Samuel 5, verses 1. We had finished off at verse 5 of chapter 5. This is when David has now become king over the whole nation of Israel. Okay? And so we're really entering into the second part of his reign, because at verse 5 it says that he reigned over Judah for 7 years, 6 months in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over the unified nation, okay, Israel and Judah. So this evening we're going to pick it up. We're on page 21 of your notes. Okay. And we're going to start here with 1 Chronicles 11, verses 1 to 3. I'll just read those verses. And this is the same thing that's actually in 2 Samuel. It says, "Then all Israel came together to David at Hebron, saying, 'Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Also in time past, even when Saul was king, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in, and the Lord your God said to you, you shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over my people Israel.' Therefore all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed David king over Israel according to the word of the Lord by Samuel." And then going on to verses 6 to 10 in 2 Samuel. Actually, let me read the ones in 1 Chronicles first, since we're there, verses 4 to 9. It says, "And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. But the inhabitants of Jebus said to David, 'You shall not come in here.' Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion," that is, the city of David. "Now David said, 'Whoever attacks the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain.' And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and became chief. Then David dwelt in the stronghold, therefore they called it the city of David. And he built the city around it from the Milo to the surrounding area. Joab repaired the rest of the city. So David went on and became great, and the Lord of hosts was with him." Okay, then let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 5, and let's look at verses 6 to 10, and then I have some information to cover with us. It says, "And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, 'You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you, thinking David cannot come in here.' Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David." You see why it's always important to read the parallel passages, because you get a little bit more information, or it fills it in, that you don't get just in the one passage. "Now David said on that day, 'Whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain.' Therefore they say, 'The blind and the lame shall not come into the house.' Then David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built all around from the Milo and inward. So David went in and became great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him." Okay, so Jerusalem. Interesting. So I have some information here, the history of Jerusalem. Peter, would you look up Genesis 14 for me, verses 17 to 20? And I'm going to have some of the rest of you look up some verses as well. Let's see. Let's see. Can you do, yeah. We're doing something a little different tonight because I'm hearing from the people that are watching online that they can't hear what's being said out there from you. So I have the mics in the two rows here. So you might want to move forward so that you can have access to a mic. Yeah, you.
Colleen's got one
Oh,
more.
she passed it forward? Okay, because there's already one in that row. Okay, it's right there. So pass that one back then.
To me? Oh, am I doing something?
Yes, I'm going to give you a verse to read.
All right.
Okay, Genesis 10, verses 15 and 16. And, okay, we'll stop there for now. I'll call on you when we're ready, okay? All right, so the history of Jerusalem. The first time we are introduced to Jerusalem is in Genesis 14, verses 17 to 20. Peter?
Then after,
Make
Just
sure.
flip the switch up. All the way up. There you go.
Uh-huh.
then after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. He gave him a tenth of all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at that time, back in the time of Abraham, okay, and this was when Abraham actually went out to defeat some kings who had taken Lot captive, all right? So at that time, it was called Salem, all right? And Abraham had just defeated an alliance of kings that had defeated Sodom and Gomorrah and taken Lot captive. Following the battle, Melchizedek, priest of God Most High, brought bread and wine to Abram and blessed him. So that's our first introduction to what became Jerusalem. The current inhabitants, the current inhabitants of Jerusalem were the Jebusites, descendants of the third son of Canaan. Okay, now you have to think back to your genealogies. Okay, Genesis 10, verses 15 and 16, please.
Canaan became the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite.
Okay, so there's a little bit about the genealogy. Okay, all right. So he's descended from one of the sons of Noah. Okay. So then we'll go back to 1 Chronicles here again, chapter 1. These are verses I already read, probably. Let's see here. 1 Chronicles 1, verses 13 and 14. Oh, here we are. And here we have Canaan, okay? Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite. Okay, here we are. The Amorite and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, and the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of just background information, okay? The Canaanites had lived in the hills and surrounding area since the time of Moses. So let's look up a couple verses here. Karen, could you look up Numbers 13:29, please? And Don, Joshua 11:3, and then pass the mic down to these folks for me, please. Numbers 13:29.
Numbers 13, verse 29. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan.
Okay. And then Joshua 11, verse 3.
Joshua 11, verse 3. To the Canaanites in the east and west, and the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites under Hermon in the land of Mizpah.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Joshua 15, verse 8. Paul, why don't you get that for me, please? And then drop down to 18, verse 16.
So 15 verse 8, then the border went up the valley of Ben Hinnom to the slope of the Jebusite on the south, that is Jerusalem. And the border went up to the top of the mountain, which is before the valley of Hinnom, to the west, which is at the end of the valley of Rephaim, toward the north. And then
Okay.
chapter 18, in verse 16. The border went down to the edge of the hill, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is in the valley of Rephaim northward. And it went down to the valley of Hinnom, to the slope of the Jebusite southward, and went down to En Rogel.
Okay. All right. So I have a verse here. This is Joshua 15, verse 8. I got that. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second. I got in the wrong place. Okay, and the border went up by the valley of the son of Hinnom to the south slope of the Jebusite city, which is of Jerusalem. The border went up to the top of the mountain that lies before the valley of Hinnom westward, which is at the end of the valley of Rephaim northward. And then dropping down to verse 60, okay, we just did that. Sorry, my apologies. 1563, Joshua 15, verse 63. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. Okay, so this is interesting because the Jebusites were in what became Jerusalem. Okay, when Joshua brought the tribes into the land, and they were supposed to conquer all of the different inhabitants and cast them out of the land, either leave or die. That was the proclamation that was made. But as it says here in verse 63, the Jebusites, who were the inhabitants of Jerusalem, probably was called Salem at that time. Okay, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Israel, or of Judah, at Jerusalem to this day. And so here we have in 2 Samuel where David now has decided that they're going to take this city, okay, from the Jebusites. Okay. Jerusalem had remained independent up to the time of David from Joshua's time. And Judges 1, verses 8 and 9 records that the Jebusites in Jerusalem had been defeated once, but the Israelites failed to take possession of the city. The Benjamites also were unsuccessful in taking Jerusalem. We won't read these verses, but here they are for reference. In Judges 1:21 and verses 19, 1 to 12, particularly verses 10 to 12. That was during the time of the reign of King Saul. Okay, they were not able to take the city. Deuteronomy 12, 1 to 7, it says, God had promised the Jews that he would appoint a place where they could come to worship him. I think it's worthy of us going and looking at this. So we'll all turn to Deuteronomy chapter 12. Okay, verses 1 to 7. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall be careful to observe in the land which the Lord God of your fathers is giving you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations which you shall dispossess served their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and burn their wooden images with fire. You shall cut down the carved images of their gods and destroy their names from that place. You shall not worship the Lord your God with such things. But you shall seek the place where the Lord your God chooses out of all your tribes to put his name for his dwelling place, and there you shall go. There you shall take your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, your vowed offerings, your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all to which you have put your hand, you and your households in which the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing what is right in his own eyes. For as yet you have not come to the rest and inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety, then there will be the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. There you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and female servants, excuse me, and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. It says, take heed to yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, but in the place which the Lord chooses, in one of your tribes, there you shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you. So it had been God's intention to choose a particular city where the nation would come to worship. Pardon me. So what did based on the verses we read in 2 Samuel, what did the Jebusites think about their city?
It was quite secure.
It was secure, yes. It was defendable. Completely?
Well, its position would certainly be defendable because it's up on a hill.
Yes. Yeah, it was defendable basically on three sides.
Yes.
On three sides.
One side.
They had one side that was weak, okay? So they thought it was impregnable, right? Could not be defeated, okay? What did they not consider? In the verse we read, it told you how the Israelites managed to get into the city. Through the water, through the water coming into the city, through the tunnel, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And so they they used that, so the water conduit. Pardon me. Sorry. Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind. Okay. The downfall was that it was impregnable. So what was their attitude?
The lame and the blind could even defend this thing against the Israelites.
Yeah, they were very haughty, weren't they? Very proud. They weren't taking the humble position at all. They figured, who are these Israelites anyways, okay? What did they not know about God and Israel? Let's look up a couple verses here. Exodus 23. Oh my. Yep, thank you.
That God keeps his promises.
Yes, that God keeps his promises. We read the verses there, didn't we, in Deuteronomy? What had God decided? He was going to choose a city for them, right? And that God was actually going to defeat all the nations, okay, that were in Canaan. Would that include the Jebusites?
Unless all is involved.
Exactly. So let's go back to Exodus chapter 23 for a moment. Peter, I'll have you read a couple verses here. I'm going to try not to talk quite so much for a couple minutes here. Exodus 23, verses 23 and 24. And let's see. Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 and 2. Nigel, can you find that?
23, 1 and 2?
No, Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 and 2. If you don't mind. Have you got the mic? Yep. Okay. Go ahead. I guess, Nigel, you go ahead first. Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 and 2.
When the Lord your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God delivers them before you, and you defeat them, then you shall utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, and show no favor to them.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Exodus 23, 23 and 24.
For my angel will go before you and bring you in the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars into pieces.
Okay. So what did the Lord say first about these 7 nations?
In verse 23, he says his angel will go ahead.
Okay. And the verse that Nigel read?
Greater and stronger than you.
Okay. They're greater and stronger than you, but then we get to the angel of the Lord will go ahead of you, all right? And who's going to defeat these 7 nations? The Israelites?
God will.
He says, and I will destroy them, right? Okay. So when we think about the Jebusites, what did they not know about God and the Israelites?
He's the true and living God.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All powerful.
All powerful. Yep.
And that the Israelites were his chosen people. So he was their God. They were just his children.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They didn't know this God, okay, who could defeat them, because the Jebusites, their focus was on the Israelites. Who are these people that they think they can conquer us? Okay? All right? And so they had a wrong perspective of God and God working through the Israelites to accomplish his purpose. Okay. What did David promise to the man who entered the city and subdued it? In the verses we read previously in 2 Samuel. Let's see, what verses were those again? It was in verses 6 to 10, I think. Yep. You didn't find it? Okay. I'm thinking we were, actually, basically, what David said is the man who would take the city would become commander of his army. Who was that man? Joab. And Joab is there through all the rest of David's reign, right to the very end, even actually into the very first of Solomon's reign. Okay? All right. But we'll get ahead of ourselves if I say anything more. So, anyways, and so we're going to be meeting Joab as we go through David's reign, and we'll get a good idea of this man. But he obviously shows his courageous nature and his commitment to David and the Lord by taking the city. 1 Chronicles 11, verse 6. Jeremy, can you get that one? And let's see. Dawn, 2 Samuel. Oh, yeah, I can get this. 2 Samuel 5, verse 8. Yes. First Chronicles 11, verse 6. Oh, we lost the ta-da. I hope everybody at home is hearing us okay. We're trying hard.
1 Chronicles 11, verse 6.
Yes.
Now David had said, "Whoever strikes down a Jebusite first shall be chief and commander." Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first, so he became chief.
Okay, so there's our confirmation. All right, 1 Chronicles 11, verse 6. Okay, and then 2 Samuel, I'm going to read this 5, verse 8, and answering the question, how was he going to conquer it? He says, "Whoever climbs up by the way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain." I think that's kind of funny that the Jebusites have said, "Oh, even the lame and the blind can't get up here and defeat us." And so here in parenthesis is David says, "Yeah, whoever goes up there and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind." Turns it on them, okay? Who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. All right. And Joab figures prominently throughout David's reign. So what is the Lord actually doing here for David when you consider this? I think as we've read these different verses, we get a sense that David knew that the Lord was going to choose a particular city. And it doesn't say it here, but it would seem that the Lord had motivated David that this was the city to take. Okay? So what's the Lord doing for David by his army taking the city of Jerusalem?
It's proving David's kingship, I guess, because he's in God's will, clearly.
Yes. Yeah, he's taking leadership. Okay? He's just become the king over the entire nation. Okay? And so he's making a very decisive move here. Okay? And so, any other thoughts before I share what I'm thinking here?
But I'm thinking with all the years that David has been running and looking after all these men that he's gathered to him,
Yes.
he would also look at that place, at Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and say, now this is a great place, like a good defendable, not undefendable, but a good position.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Go. The mic, please.
In consolidating the nation, he's not making either Hebron or Samaria the capital.
Okay.
He's going to a new place.
That's a new place. Yes. And it also is, he's carrying out the will of God as far as the Jebusites are concerned. They'd already been told to kill them or send them off, and that hadn't happened. In all the years that Israel has been in the land, the Jebusites have stood firm in Jerusalem, and it's kind of like they were a thorn in Israel's flesh. You know, kind of like, ha ha, you can't get us. You ever played that when you were a child? You know, you get in a high position and you can't get me. Yeah, right. Okay. At any rate, so I wrote down here that the Lord is actually establishing him and Israel as a political power. Okay, by destroying the Jebusites, he's asserting the Israelites' right to the whole land. Okay, and he's giving notice to everybody that don't stand in our way. Okay, the Jebusites have resisted us for hundreds of years, and now no more. Okay, and also, what would it do to David in his relationship with the Israelites? Any thoughts?
It would strengthen it.
It would strengthen his relationship, right?
Oh, they're going to love this guy.
Yes, he's going to be very popular. Right. The Israelites, the nation watching this, is going to say, hey, this is the right guy for the job. My goodness. After hundreds of years, we finally have gotten rid of the Jebusites. And so it's built a very solid relationship he has with the nation. Okay. I said the next two verses, that must be 9 and 10. Yes, we read that. So he changed the name, okay, to Jerusalem, but it became known as the City of David, which kind of goes along with the popularity thing, right? David's the one who basically took it, and so it kind of has his name attached to it. And what did he do for the city?
Well, he built it up.
He built it up. Yes. And actually, where he built it, where that weakness was, he fortified that part of the city to make it defendable on all four sides. Okay. And what's the testimony in verse 10? He became great. Okay? And the most important part,
God was with him.
God was with him. Okay? So if you have God with you, hey, what else do you need, huh?
Who can be against us?
Exactly. Right. Okay. Let's go on to verses 11 and 12 in 2 Samuel chapter 5. It says, Then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters and masons, and they built David a house. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. If you turn the page in your notes to page 23, you will see a map there at the top of the page, because we need to understand this a little bit. In here we have, you can see where Judah and Israel are, where the Philistines are, and then the other nations around, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Aram. But notice where Phoenicia is, okay? And the two cities of Tyre and Sidon are marked there on the map. So you can see that Hiram, where he was, okay? And he sends... he sends the materials needed for David to build his house, okay, his palace, okay. I wrote here, Hiram was probably just beginning his reign as king of Tyre, befriending both David and Solomon during their reigns. This demonstrates that David was gaining international recognition and popularity. 1 Kings recounts how Hiram also befriended Solomon and provided cedar and cypress for the temple. Okay, so why would Hiram send all this material and workers to David and help build his palace?
To try and have an alliance.
To have an alliance, okay. Yep, a political alliance. Why else? What has just happened?
Knowing King David, he probably just married his daughter.
Okay. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. Just so you know, Jeremy, that's not in the agenda.
Isn't it also because it's an open water, like a port, so then they, can work together, like if, getting things brought in and out?
Yes. Okay. For trade. Okay. Yes. Those two cities were ports, and where they were on the trade route between Africa and Europe and Asia. Okay, and so they were very strategic places. And we've just been talking about what has just occurred prior to Hiram contacting David.
Well, David has just defeated one people group,
Yes.
and he'd been having issues with the Philistines. I don't know where they were at.
Oh, they're next.
Yes.
I had to throw that in. Yeah, so, okay. And here you have Hiram, who's the king of Phoenicia. So,
He's probably nervous.
I think so. I think he was nervous. He's thinking, okay, I better make a positive move here and establish a good relationship with David and Israel, because otherwise, are they going to come and take my ports? Maybe. You just stop and think about it for a minute. He's feeling a little nervous about what's going to happen here. I wrote down here, he understood that David was establishing Israel as a power to be reckoned with. Okay? If you can dislodge a people who have thwarted your efforts for hundreds of years, then what stands between you and anybody else? Okay? Not much. Okay? And I think Hiram, do you think maybe he appreciated that they had a higher power on their side?
Well, I'm going by memory, but I feel like he understood or knew David's God,
Okay.
but I'm not sure anymore.
Yes. I think I actually mentioned those later here. It's coming up. But was Hiram actually a believer?
Probably not.
Probably not. But at least he had a respect for David's relationship with God. Maybe thought David probably couldn't have accomplished this, of disposing the Jebusites without God being on his side. And so he's wanting to make sure that David's on his side. Okay?
What was the relationship between Hiram, king of Tyre, and the Jebusites prior?
Okay, Karen just asked what was the relationship between the Jebusites and the Phoenicians. I really don't know. It's hard to, there's nothing in the scripture to say one way or the other, to my knowledge at least.
They would have used the ports.
If they were into exporting anything or bringing materials in, those are the two ports they probably would have used, because I don't think the other ports along the Mediterranean were developed the same as those two ports.
As if they were, say, enemies. If Hiram, king of Tyre, was enemies with the Jebusites, maybe having the house being built for David is like a gift to him as a reward for protecting him.
That's a good point. By defeating the Jebusites, it's kind of like, okay, you got rid of somebody that was a problem to me, and so I'll reward you for your effort. Okay, so there's a lot of different things here, a lot of different motivations. Okay, I wrote down here as well, because we intimated this. He appreciated the fact that David and Israel could easily block the trade route to Tyre and the Phoenicians because the Jewish farmers depended on those ports for food. And so they could, if you didn't have a good relationship, they could block the ports, okay? Because the trade, now basically David and Israel had control of the land, and they could block the trade route, which would really thwart Tyre and Sidon because they depended on trade. That was their livelihood, okay? Things came in from all over the world into those ports. And
It's interesting that in Acts chapter 12, verse 20,
yes,
the same thing is it talks about feeding the country.
okay. Yeah, do you want to read that?
Now he was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and with one accord they came to him, having won over Blastus, the king's chamberlain. They
Okay.
were asking for peace because their country was fed by the king's country.
Okay.
So
Oh, yes. Tyre and Sidon depended on the Israelites to provide food for them. They provided other goods, okay? And so you really want to be at peace with this nation, okay? They needed that. All
which
right.
is very interesting that Israel was farming land along the river, or
Yes.
along all that them ports, was obviously very forested.
Yes.
So
yes.
it was a good.
The cedars of, the cedars
It
of
talks
Lebanon.
about the cedars. That's all it ever talks about is the cedars.
Yes, yes. It's like here on our continent, it'd be like talking about the redwoods in California. Okay, these massive trees. Okay, and that was their livelihood. So they offer all this, the trees and other things for David to build his palace. Okay. I wrote on page 23 at the top some interesting facts. Hiram would have appreciated that David had defeated his warlike neighbors, the Philistines. Okay, we're going to be getting into that here very shortly. From a practical point of view, it was necessary for the Phoenicians to be on good terms with the Jews because Israel could block the trade route to Tyre, and the Phoenicians depended on Jewish farmers for their food. Okay, we talked about that, yes. Okay, so we're repeating it. Okay. So on the next page, you'll see another map on page 24. It has to do with the Philistines. They're next on the agenda. And so you can look at that map where we look at some verses here. In chapter 5, verses 17 to 25.
Is that modern day Gaza?
In part, yes. Yes, it would be. Yeah.
The Philistines are not the Palestinians.
No, they're not the Palestinians. No, not at all. They actually came from Greece. Okay, the current day Palestinians are actually Arabs.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's kind of interesting because I almost felt like doing a current events in here because I'm studying through the chapters that are coming later in Kings and Chronicles. And the whole thing comes up about the genealogies, okay, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and where their descendants went and who they became. And then you've got Ishmael, okay, and Ishmael is the Arab nations come from Ishmael, okay, and who becomes the big problem with Israel up to today is the Arab nations, which includes the Gaza Strip, okay, as well as the other Arab nations, So here, when you think of the repercussions of sin, okay, Abraham made the mistake of he took things into his own hands, thinking it's impossible for us to have a child, even though the child was promised by God, and has Ishmael, who has been a problem ever since, up to the current day, and will be till the end. Okay? And so you see the spiritual battle which is really what's going on here. It's Satan as opposed to God. That's really what we're looking at. Okay, but that's a whole other topic. Okay, it's kind of okay. Here's interesting. I just have to do this. I'm sorry, but I listened to a program. I only know his first name, Amir. Pardon me? Savardi, yes. On is what's going on over there now the end? Is this, and he quoted verses that talk about the war of Gog and Magog. You have to have Russia, you have to have Turkey, you have to have Syria, all these different nations involved. But there's one verse he quoted particularly. He says that when that takes place, no one stands with Israel. No one, not one nation will stand with Israel at that battle when that comes. But that's not what's happening right now. So he said, don't believe the false information that's being passed out by, and he talked about churches and pastors who are saying this is the end before the Lord returns. That's not what we're looking at right now. It may be some kind of a precursor to that, but at this point, it's not. So I think that's important. That's why we need to know the scriptures. Because when these things come down, we can go, oh, but the Bible says, and we have to have that foundation so that we can stand against the untruths that are propagated. Okay. He called it fake news. That's a term that's been floating around now since the Trump administration. Okay. So talking about the Philistines, okay, I'm going to read these verses first, verses 17 to 25. It says, Now when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. You remember there was a point there where David faked it with the Philistines, like I'm your friend, okay, and was using them as a way to get protection from Saul. At any rate, and David heard of it and went down to the stronghold. Now, where was the stronghold? We're not talking about Jerusalem. Okay, we're backing up the train here just a little bit. Okay, the scripture does that sometimes. It takes you to a certain point and then it steps back a bit. And really, this is referring to when David was still in Hebron, and he's just been anointed king over the whole nation, but he hasn't moved to Jerusalem yet. At least that's the way I see this, because he went down to the stronghold. This is where he was hiding out in Ziklag. Okay, that's where the stronghold was with his 300 men. Okay, so he went down to the stronghold. The Philistines also went and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Okay, you see where this is? Okay, look here on the map on page 24. You see the Philistines come over here, and the valley of Rephaim is in between Jerusalem and Adullam. Okay, that's kind of the area where David was situated. Okay, all right. The Philistines also went and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand? And the Lord said to David, Go up, and I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand. So David went to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And he said, The Lord has broken through my enemies before me like a breakthrough of water. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And they left their images there, and David and his men carried them away. Then the Philistines went up once again and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, and he said, You shall not go up. It's good to inquire of the Lord on each occasion that you go into battle, right? Because the Lord may give you different directions. He says, Circle around behind them and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees. And it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees Then you shall advance quickly, for then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. And David did so, as the Lord commanded him, and he drove back the Philistines from Geba as far as Gezer. All right. Okay, so I wrote here, it is probable that these attacks occurred before David relocated to Jerusalem, because he and his men went down to the stronghold, the wilderness area where he had lived in the days when Saul was out to kill him. And then we have those verses from 1 Samuel 22 and 23. David and his army met the Philistines in the valley of Rephidim, a short distance from Jerusalem, about 2 miles to the south. So why did the Philistines attack now? Okay, so let's look at this. Let's go ahead, Jeremy.
They're likely trying to attack before he gets stronger.
Yes. Has he defeated the Jebusites yet?
Probably not if he hasn't.
Probably not. Okay, but he's just been crowned king of the entire nation. The nation is now unified. Okay? And so David is a threat. Okay? Irrespective of the Jebusites. Okay, we've now got a guy who's, they knew who he was. They knew that he was a leader. They knew that he was good in battle. He had all these mighty men around him. Now he's got the whole army of the whole nation with him. Okay? He's got a united nation. He's just expanded his power exponentially. Okay? And so when David was a threat, or David was not a threat when he was in Hebron. Okay? And the nation was divided. When you have a divided nation, David had very limited power. Okay? So the unification, and then it could be, because it doesn't define this exactly. He hadn't moved, it says he hadn't moved yet up to Jerusalem. Possibly he had already defeated the Jebusites, but it's not really clear. Okay? And if he had, that would speak very loudly to the Philistines, okay, because they were well aware who the Jebusites were, and if he's taken them out, we're in trouble, okay, all right, and so if they could defeat David and his forces before he actually took control of the whole nation, what would they have accomplished?
Everything. It would have thwarted God's will and
Yeah.
stopped the nation from unifying. They'd take over that part of the
And
country.
who's to say they wouldn't take over the nation?
Yeah.
They'd always wanted to anyways. They had tried under Saul, okay, with Saul, came into the nation, and Saul basically died at their hands, okay, all right, and so how does David handle the 2 attacks by the Philistines?
They also have to just hate David.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's a little boy and he beat him up. Like they can't have good feelings toward.
Oh no, their interaction with David has not been really good. No, I mean, first he kills off their giant, Goliath, okay, and then he slaps him in the face by living amongst them, pretending to be their friend, and then turns on them, and so they've been humiliated in battle, and humiliated on a political standpoint, okay? And so they are really bitter, I would think. And before he gets to slap them again, okay, we're gonna take him out. It's time. We can't wait any longer. He's in Hebron. We know he's going to move to Jerusalem, and he's going to consolidate the nation and the army, and then what? We haven't got a chance. Okay? And they're not looking at this from a spiritual standpoint. They're only looking at it from a political standpoint, okay? Because they can't appreciate that God is on his side, okay? All right.
It'd almost be like whoever is the kingdom that's going to take out David is going to be the head ruler.
Yes, whoever can defeat David and the nation, they're going to have quite a prestigious position, okay? And then they could probably continue on and take additional territory, couldn't they? If they were able to get the nation of Israel, then who's to say they couldn't defeat Moab and Ammon? The Amalekites. Well, they were already friends with the Amalekites.
There'd be a fear developed.
Yes, exactly. Fear. They'd be fearful. Exactly. Okay. So we didn't answer the question yet. So how does David handle the two attacks?
Seeks God first.
He seeks God's direction first. Okay. But why is that important? Don't you think? Okay. I mean, I'm just looking at it from a human standpoint here. I mean, David knows that the Philistines are his enemies, and they're going to stand against his taking control of the nation. Isn't it just logical to go down and deal with them? Okay, well, they came in. Okay, they came in and attacked. So why is it so important to inquire of the Lord when it was quite obvious that the Lord's will would obviously be to defeat them?
Because they had to know how God wanted them to do it.
Yes, he needed to know
It wasn't
how.
just going down, it was going around from the rear, right?
Yeah, two different approaches to defeating them, two different battles. And the thing is, I mean, they attack and he confronts them, like normal armies do, face to face. Okay, first time. The second time, the Philistines would expect the same, wouldn't they? He's going to come out. Okay, and so it was important that the God be the one who directed the attack. Okay. I think there's so much we can apply to our lives just in that when we get into situations and I can only speak to myself, okay? I get in a situation and I try to figure it out. And so many times I go out on my own and I do my thing and it just doesn't go well, okay? And then the Lord will often bring me up short and say, "Did you ever think to ask me?" No. And so, it's like that. Before we get ourselves in a pickle, it's a good idea to say, "Okay, Lord, here's the situation. What should I do?" And sometimes it means you've got to just sit down and wait, because the answer isn't going to be like that. You have to wait on the Lord, okay?
Because I would have killed Saul in the cave.
Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
That's still his heart, is to wait for the Lord
Yeah.
to give him the direction on when to do things.
Yeah.
Because it would have been obvious to do that, just like it would have been obvious just to attack the Philistines.
Yeah.
But sometimes the obvious is not
Yeah.
God's will.
Yeah. Jeremy was just sharing, in case people, he didn't have a mic. I don't know if they heard you or not, but that they would have heard. Very good. Thank you. We have help in the booth tonight back there. So we're thankful Brad is here to make sure you all can hear at home. Okay. All right.
You not find it interesting, John, that I'm wondering, after David inquired of the Lord to attack from the rear, how he relayed that message to Joab and the mighty men, like his army. He said, "We're not going to attack. This is what God said. So this is how we're going to do it." So this is what I find interesting about David, so much of being so non-confrontational with his family and Joab, and yet somehow he has a way of handling them that when the Lord's involved, then they do it the Lord's way.
Mm-hmm.
He has been very gifted to handle people.
Yeah, he became a very good politician, okay? But he also, in all those years he was running from Saul, he was in the court. He was in Saul's court for a number of years, I believe. before he was cast out or ran away before he got killed. And so he saw what it took to run the nation, okay? And I'm sure he had a lot of contact with important people being in the court, and he saw what to do and what not to do, how to handle people, and I think he learned that. And then when he was running from Saul and these men started showing up, they were, what's the word I was looking for? Leaving Saul and coming from other parts of the country, he learned how to administer and handle them. When you think about Joab and the army, the responsibility of the commander is to come to the commander-in-chief and get your instructions. So I think the bond between Joab and David has been building, okay, because of the defeat of the Jebusites. And Joab led the men into the city and took it. And so that bond is very strong. And I think Joab understood, too, the relationship that David had with God. So when David says, we're not going to do it the normal way, we're going to go in behind, I think David would have said to him, because God told me this is the way we're to do it. I don't think he would have held that information back. Okay. So I wrote down here for my own notes, I said, David needed to assume that since the first victory was victorious, it doesn't mean that it would happen again. You think of another incident in the scriptures where the first battle was victorious and the second was not? Think of Joshua. Okay. Ai. Yes.
Yeah.
When they came into Jericho, Joshua had asked the Lord, what should we do? And God gave very specific instructions about what they were to do to take Jericho. Okay. But then when they went on to Ai, they were thinking of the wonderful victory they had had, and they just assumed it was going to continue. And so they went in their own power. Okay. And we know what happened. They were defeated. Okay. There was an interesting verse in here. What's this marching in the trees? And when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly.
I'm hearing the Philistine army.
No, I don't think so.
I'm thinking the Philistines are seeing God's army, and they take the eyes completely off the Israelites.
Oh, they're seeing God's army.
Yeah,
Oh,
'cause
God's
they're-
army. Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Whatever
Which
that
would
looks
be
like.
which would be who? Angels,
Yes.
perhaps. Okay. Let's look at Psalm 104, verse 4. Let me see if I can get there fast enough. Psalm 104, verse 4. Okay, let's see here. All right. Verse 3. It says, he lays the beams of his upper chambers in the waters, who makes the clouds his chariot, who walks on the wings of the wind, who makes his angels spirits, his ministers a flame of fire. It's not saying that particularly, but if I may be so bold, it almost seems like the army of God, okay? The angels are marching. When you hear the marching, that's just so, I think that's just so cool. When you hear the marching in the trees, across the tops of the trees, and maybe it unnerved the Philistines too. I don't know, because did they hear it? We don't know. But I thought this is just really cool. It doesn't say that the angels are going out to fight for them, but it just says when you hear the marching, okay? All right. And then it says here, in the second battle, David pursues the enemy all the way from Geba. That's Gibeon. That's how, Gibeon, that's way north, all right? North of Jerusalem, okay? So they had actually come in that far, okay? To Gezer, a distance of 15 to 20 miles, regaining the territory that Saul lost in his last battle. That's very significant, okay? Because they took that whole area north of Jerusalem, okay? And so David defeats them in the valley of Rephidim, okay? But it goes beyond that, okay? He routs them from Gibeon and sends them all the way back to their own borders, okay? Our time is gone here. I'm going to try, let's just finish up chapter 5. By defeating the Philistines, what was the political effect? Or what would be the political effect by defeating the Philistines?
Well, he would have a 100% approval rate of the nation.
Yes. Yes. It boosted his approval rating to the rest of the nation, okay? And made the people confident, okay? Bold, courageous, okay? Because they would follow David's lead, okay? Anything else?
They would gain all those resources as well.
Okay, he would gain the resources that had been lost. Is that what you're saying?
Because the Philistines would have towns and fields and
Yeah.
livestock. They would gain all of that. It'd be a surplus. It'd be a happy period of time.
Yes. Well, if the Philistines had taken the territory from Bethel to their own nation, they were taking the crops, they were taking everything, and the people were basically enslaved. Okay, so they've been set free. And so they regain, the nation will now prosper, okay, because now they'll have their fields back and whatever businesses there were would be back in their hands. And so the nation should start to prosper where it couldn't, all right? It was a stabilizing factor in the nation too, doesn't it? It's kind of, it's solidifying his reign, okay? But I think there's one other point here. Okay, so you live, let's just pretend for a moment, you live in Moab or Ammon. And you've just heard word that David has defeated and killed off the Jebusites, or at least expelled them from the nation, and taken back all the land that the Philistines had taken from the Israelites. What could you possibly be thinking? If I was the king of Moab or Ammon, I would be thinking, I'm going to keep a very low profile. Okay? I'm not going to do any saber rattling here because I just don't want to fight this guy. Okay? So basically, notice what's being given to Israel's enemies, enemy nations, that they better be careful what they do. Okay? If you challenge us, we will come after you. Right? Okay. It says, some commentators believe that the Gadite warriors joined David's army at this time. That's in 1 Chronicles 12, verses 8 to 15. And this is probably the occasion when 3 of David's mighty men broke through the Philistine lines and obtained for David water from the Bethlehem well. Remember that situation? Okay. It's thought that, in commentators that I read, they thought that this is when that actually took place, okay, when they broke through the lines. And see, the thing that strikes me here is with the defeats that they were seeing, this was emboldening the people to stand up against their enemies. Instead of cowering and running away, they were, let's go get them, and so I think that's just an interesting thought. I'm going to stop there because the next thing gets into the whole thing of David's multiplying of wives. But we'll pick that up next week. So that's at the end of chapter 5. Okay, time is gone. Thank you very much for your input, and I trust you found this enlightening.
And entertaining.
Oh, good.